Hi everyone, welcome back to my page. Have you ever been in an argument with someone that no matter how much you try and explain things to them and be logical and give them reasoning, you are just met with resistance and defensiveness? The more you give them a different perspective or new information or facts, the more they go down the route that they believe is the truth and just don't want to listen. All they're doing is they're arguing to win, not to resolve. And if you've ever been met with this kind of response when you're trying to have a discussion or an explanation or an argument with someone where you're trying to make a point, it usually means that they're deep in their cognitive dissonance, which links with my last video on this topic. Cognitive dissonance is when you have conflicting beliefs, and even though you may know that something is wrong, you blindly will argue it and stick it out because that's what you want. That's what feels comfortable. Now, what happens when you're facing an argument with someone who's deep in their cognitive dissonance and they just don't see any logic to it? What are the things that you can do to try and make them see a point, to diffuse the situation, and to turn it back into a discussion rather than an argument? If you haven't been to my page, welcome. I'm Hamasa. I look at personal development, mental and emotional well-being, and day-to-day issues. Do write in the comments below if there's any topics that you would like me to cover. But this week's video links closely to the one that I posted last, which was on cognitive dissonance. I'm going to summarize the term for you guys here quickly in case you haven't seen that video, and then we can go into telltale signs of when someone is in that situation and what to do to get them out and try and reason with them. Cognitive dissonance is when you know that something is wrong and it's facts and you know it, but you start making excuses for that or justifying it and having reasons as to why it's okay for you to do that. A good example of that would be, again, I'll use the example that I used in my previous video, which was junk food. It's like knowing that constantly eating junk food is bad for you. You know that. It's facts. However, you try and make reasoning for it, like life's short, I'm here to enjoy it, I love my food, I'm just going to eat how I want, this makes me happy. But you kind of feel guilty every time you eat because deep down you know it's wrong. Now, when you are dealing, so this is basically cognitive dissonance. And unfortunately, because it's usually people justifying their wrongdoing, which they feel the most passionate about, which is the case all the time, is the one that's the hardest for us to let go of. Therefore, we will defend it to death. And this happens in general debates about politics, religion, and things when you truly, maybe deep down, you know that there's some sort of other logic or explanation because you don't have all the answers. Yet, if someone comes and tells you otherwise, because that's your belief, you're just going to argue it out, or because that's your justification for a wrongdoing or a wrong situation. And when you are on the flip side of this and you're trying to have a discussion with someone who is in their cognitive dissonance, therefore their defenses are up, they are going down the route of no logic will sink in because they've made up their mind about the situation anyway. So there's no point you trying to explain things to them with facts and logic because they will come back with some ridiculous, ludicrous response to justify that their belief system is the correct one. And the ways to see that someone is in that state, first and foremost, is if you hit them and stun them with some new information that they don't know of. So you bring up a fact and you give them something really solid that shows them that what they're saying is actually possibly otherwise, or there are other options or other situations, and it's subjective. And they just do not change their perspective whatsoever. Most people who are mature and who understand or have self-awareness, when you give them or when you present very solid pieces of information to them, most likely they will judge the information you've given them and then make a decision based on that, or change their mind, or agree to an extent, or compromise, or try and understand and learn what they don't know, because they understand that, okay, I may have been wrong here, let me look at things from a different perspective. But if you tell them a new piece of information and they're not having any of it and they just continue arguing blindly, that's one of the first signs for you to understand that this person is going down the cognitive dissonance route, which is going down the route of I'm going to argue this out to death. This is my point and I am right. The next sign to look out for is when the person that you're discussing this with tries to then put words in your mouth and summarize what you're trying to imply or say. And they take that and run away with it. So it's like summarizing the situation and taking the worst possible outcome out of it and taking that and running away with it. So looking at this as, oh, so you're trying to say that I shouldn't eat. You know that the intention here may not necessarily be that they're trying to tell you to not eat or to not enjoy your food, that is coming from a place of concern. Yet you want to twist this, or the person who's saying this, their words are being twisted to sound like they're being malicious, and so that intent is then twisted, and therefore the worst possible outcome is always seen, and that's going to make you naturally be defensive if you feel like this person means the worst towards you. So when you're in a position when you're arguing with someone who seems to keeps summarizing what you're trying to say in its worst possible version, then also understand that this person does not want to see your intention or logic. They're committed to fighting you. And if they try and then confuse you because they may see that you may have some sort of reasoning and logic here, so then they keep changing the point of the argument, the goalpost. It's 1 minute it's here and the next minute it's way further out because they keep trying to change the narrative because they can understand or see that they're getting cornered in one area. So if you have logical reasons that you're giving them and they don't want to accept that, they may then try and change the goalpost and make the argument about something different. Oh, but you said this a few weeks ago, or I saw you enjoy cake 3 weeks ago. How are you going to tell me not to eat junk food? Well, what's that got to do with anything? Stop trying to make it about me and my wants and needs and stop getting defensive. So this is what happens. The goalpost keeps changing. The aim of the game keeps changing. The aim of the argument keeps changing. And so it throws you off. And when that happens, it's because they're trying to confuse you and they're trying to deflect again. And when you see that happening, try and bring it back to the point. Yeah, no, I understand that and we can discuss that later. But right now, my concern is your health. And let's discuss why you do this. Like, bring the point, make sure that you bring everything back to the point you're making. Don't lose sight of the end goal, which is what is it that you're trying to make a point of. And if that person really feels cornered, then they start doing the typical things that we're used to when you're dealing with someone who's quite abusive or maybe toxic or deep in their cognitive dissonance, which is shouting and screaming. They always say, don't raise your voice, improve your argument. People who don't have a good argument or much of a leg to stand on then try and intimidate the situation and try and be overpowering by raising their voice, being the loudest person in the room, shutting you down and speaking over you. And then if that doesn't work, then they walk away. They leave. They leave you hanging. They dismiss you. They're disrespectful in that manner. Either they're shouting at you or they just don't want to know, which both have their downfalls and are wrong ways of dealing in a situation like this. And lastly, they start attacking your character. So instead of making the points about the argument or the point of the discussion, they start name calling, picking out things that you do wrong, how you are, and basically just being disrespectful towards you as a person rather than dealing with the situation. So when you see these telltale signs, and it doesn't mean any one of them alone means that, and all of these situations are subjective. It depends on the argument, it depends on the situation, it depends on the person. So when you see all these things together regularly happening, again, patterns of behavior, this is how every argument is dealt with. They go deep into their point of view and there's no logic or reasoning behind this and they just don't want to know and they start being quite abusive and rude towards you. Then you need to understand that there are a couple things that you can do to soften the blow and to try and bring back the conversation to a level that you guys are able to be amicable and still be on the same page. So what do we do when we're dealing with someone who's deep in their cognitive dissonance? One of the things that we can do to bring the conversation back is to crack a joke, to let the other person know that we're still cool, we're still a team. Make it light, make the situation feel lighter, less tension, less heavy. So if you can make a joke in the moment about something, it straight away will lighten the mood. The second thing is that if you see them possibly considering your point of view, reconsidering what they're saying, or coming to your side of things, then don't rub your winnings in their face. Because what happens is when you are like, I was right, that straight away makes people go defensive again, and they might slip back into their cognitive dissonance very quickly. So when this happens, be gracious about it. Respect them and appreciate that. I'm so glad that you see things from my point of view. Give them that, appreciate it, but don't make too much of a fuss of it, and don't rub it in their face that you were right and they were wrong. That is never ever going to work if you want someone to see your point of view. This isn't about, again, winning the argument, it's about reaching a resolution. And the next thing is to understand that when this happens, people won't just change overnight. This isn't like the minute they agreed with you, then their perspective is changed automatically and their habits are changed automatically. Things like smoking or eating junk food or being a type of way, it takes a long time to start getting rid of these habits. It's not an overnight process. So understand and support that, and don't get frustrated if the person is beginning to make changes, but that change isn't instantaneous. It's very unlikely for you to have these expectations and for that to happen. So you're just going to end up being disappointed. So understand that if they're willing to see things from your point of view, or they're agreeing with you and they're slowly beginning to make these changes, then that's progress, and that's great. And lastly, it's important for us to be conscious and aware not to hold people's past inconsistencies against them. People tend to argue very hard about something that they strongly believe, or they really, really mean what they're saying. So they will argue it hard, they will fight to death. And if they then slowly later on change their mind or grow out of that mindset or see things from your point of view, do not bring that up and throw it in their face. Because that, again, in order for someone to be consistent and to stick to their word and to own who they are, they would feel like, you know what, let me slip back into that mindset, because now that I've changed my mind or I've grown, that's being used against me. So appreciate people's growth, celebrate people's growth. Don't throw it in their face and say, haha, you used to be like this and look at you now. That's never good or healthy, and that's not going to get you the desired effect that you want out of having a constructive conversation with someone. However, saying all of this and being aware of all these telltale signs that cognitive dissonance is taking place and you're using it in conversations with other people, it's only good and it's only useful and it's only beneficial if you're using that same logic towards yourself. Because the most dangerous type of cognitive dissonance is the one that you have within yourself. So be aware of that. That's what makes someone being aware and self-aware. Is understanding that you yourself are going down this cognitive dissonance route, understanding that you yourself may be defensive, understanding that you yourself may not open your mind to look at things or new information or change your perspective or give someone else a chance to make you understand their point of view. So that's the key part here. Speak to yourself with kindness, crack a joke with yourself when you're too hard on yourself. Understand that you also had inconsistencies, so don't punish yourself if you've changed your mindset, if you've come and you've grown in a new direction. Take all of those into account and understand that your own cognitive dissonance is the one that you will find the hardest to deal with. So apply that to yourself, and then when you've mastered that or you've come in control of that, make sure that you're aware when other people are doing it so that you can make your point to them. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have, please subscribe, like and comment, and I'll see you guys here again soon. Thank you for watching. Mwah.